Well, I'm
for
glad I
doing
thought
what
it
you
up.
did.
But I didn't do, but you see, I didn't do the dirty work of what it meant to
No,
carry
but
this
had it
thing
not
through.
been for you jumping in your
That's
car
right.
Yeah,
and
And
driving
if
driving
I
down
hadn't
here.
done that, and they hadn't
I-
been shooting the crows,
That's
there
right.
would have been no school.
That's right.
But it was absolutely definite that we couldn't, either of us,
Mhm.
have the school unless it was halfway.
Mhm. Even the imagination
Well, the funny
to
part
think of
was-
having it halfway.
Why was it here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the strangest thing, and it took me exactly 20 minutes.
Mhm.
And
Or
it
for
just
you
as
to
if the
even
car was
think
being
it was a
driven
good
to
place.
it.
Yeah.
What?
For you to even recognize it as a good place. I mean,
Yeah.
Oh, well,
it
I
occurred
just
to you.
loved that little, I loved the bathtub on the porch, the shooting of the crows and everything. I just thought, this has atmosphere.
And the stream.
And the
Yeah,
stream.
and the stream.
We talked about whether we
If
say
it hadn't
creek or
had the
creek.
stream, I
Yeah.
don't think I might have turned around.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Probably still the single
And
thing
then
that
there's
attracts
this
people.
hill coming
Right.
down, you know, which
Well,
just
for
seemed to be
children.
Uh-huh.
ideal.
I know.
I
I know. In
think-
fact, when I first brought my son here, which was a while ago, and I really, like many other parents, didn't quite know what I was getting into.
Yeah.
Loved what I saw, was a little nervous.
Yeah.
And the first day, I remember these children running down at dismissal, just cascading down these hills and
Yeah.
calling their teachers by their first names. And I got tears in my eyes because I remembered my elementary school,
Yes.
which was filled
Very
of,
different.
with fear and intimidation
Exactly.
and rules and all the bad things that sort of killed my curiosity from
Yes.
an early age. And I saw this as having such wonderful
Yes.
spirit. Yeah.
Exactly.
And my story when I brought my son was about the creek. I mean, I think
Yeah.
that has intrigued generations of
Generally,
children.
that creek is what did it.
I
think we
remember
got
him.
a lot
Oh,
of
absolutely.
pupils just by looking,
Right,
having
exactly.
the creek.
He stood on
Isn't
the
it funny?
bridge
Yeah.
and looked
The
at
idea of the
creek.
water flowing,
Right.
you know, that it was a flowing thing.
And the hours of dam building, I don't know
Oh,
whether that
every-
happened then.
everybody built
Yeah,
dams, that's
yeah.
true.
Every generation, every class.
Every
That's right.
time.
One
But-
teacher we were talking about, Peter Groves, who was here in the 70s, the late
Yeah.
70s, his class actually did a year-long dam building project.
Oh,
They
really?
just kept adding and adding.
Oh, how
yeah,
lovely.
yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
So,
So that's it.
A couple of details. Was there a fair?
I don't
Do you
know.
recall? And what else? There was always the transportation. There are certain things that we feel just go with Miquon, and one of them, of course, is transportation. But you mentioned that the mothers drove the children with
At
their
that-
carpools.
Yes, we had carpools.
But there were no buses or.
Oh, no, with the small amount of children we had, everybody was very, and I think the reason was that the mothers wanted to come over here.
So they didn't mind driving.
And then later on, I remember the staff and the teachers, we had drawing lessons in the afternoon after school was over, and I began to draw and paint here. I took art classes here. That started me off in the art world for a while.
Were those lessons for the children that
Well, the
you
art
joined?
teacher that was here said, well, why don't the grown-ups come?
Right.
In the afternoon or the evening, I can't remember.
So it really was family education.
Yeah, it was family education. And that worked out very well for a while.
Did you hear of an Amy Phillips? Because she was one of the early principals, wasn't she?
Who?
Amy
Amy
Phillips?
Phillips?
I really don't know.
So that was after
You
1940.
see, over a period of 50 years, there must have been a number of
Yeah, I
principals.
just wondered if she was before 40.
I only remember the first three, I think.
Miss Caird, a miss? Was she
Well,
Miss?
She was Miss Caird, yes.
Do you remember if it was C-A-I-R-D?
That was C-A-I-R-D, Ruth.
Never heard that name.
you
all
know,
have-
you said that interested me. You said you decided to look for a headmistress.
Yeah.
Now, did you
Yes.
look for a headmistress as opposed to a headmaster,
Headmaster.
or did you just say that because you ended
Well, I
up with a
guess it's because we
headmistress?
found a headmistress. And I think, well, Springside had always had a headmistress.
Mhm.
It seemed somehow more appropriate to have a woman. I don't know, I think if we'd found a man at the time. You see, eventually we ended
We
up
did
You
have.
did, yeah.
with, and we've had men all along, haven't you? No?
Yes.
Yes, we've
except for
had a
Amy.
number of
Yeah.
them.
Mhm.
Except for Amy Phillips.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was there any discussion about education for women?
No,
That wasn't a concern at
no.
the time.
All the people that came that taught in the school were very well educated.
But no one was concerned, for example, about educating women to be wives
Oh, we
rather
hadn't
than
gotten
scholars.
to, when I was there, there's nothing to do with women's lib or anything like that. That hadn't
Right.
started.
But you were still interested in educating the girls as well as the boys?
Oh,
And you
yes.
didn't have a separate kind of
No,
education?
not at all. That,
Or one or
it
the
was
other.
an equal.
Was there any
Is that-
discussion about whether the
Was that
sexes should be
deliberate?
separated?
No, I don't think so.
So,
At that age, it was,
Right.
you know, it hadn't come that far.
You said Peggy Kiskadden or Peggy Bach had met this Mr. Curry
Yes.
from Dartington Hall,
That's right.
and that he was working at, did you say
I
Abington
think he was the
Friends?
head of the Oak Lane
Oak Lane.
School.
Oak Lane.
Is there still an Oak Lane School?
Yes,
Yes,
there
and in
is.
fact,
Oh,
I
sure.
thought of that when you said that. I thought, why didn't you look at Oak Lane for your children?
Mhm.
Because wasn't that
Well,
fairly
that was
progressive?
much too far away.
Oh, it was too
Oh.
far away.
It's a question of distance.
Okay.
And that would have been impossible. Of course, we went over to visit the school, but he was really the one who, I think without him, it wouldn't have been possible.
Mhm.
And then, of course, our visiting, I don't know whether Peggy went or not, but as I went over to visit with Dartington Hall,
Mhm. You went.
and to me, that was, it was a school far more further out than Miquon. It was tame.
Was it related to Summerhill?
It's full, it's what?
Summerhill?
To the Summerhill?
No, Summerhill's entirely different.
That's entirely different.
A.S. Neal.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was very, and I have a lot of friends in Europe who went to those schools, but Dartington Hall, there was, you could do anything you wanted, the children. And there was one boy who came when I was there, and I said, they said, well, we had a little problem with this boy. When he first came, he said he didn't want to go to classes. And they said, what do you want to do? He said he wanted to ride a bicycle. So they said, all right, just ride. And he just rode for 2 weeks. And then finally he came up and he was so bored, he said, do you think I could go to class? That was the kind of school it wanted. They didn't wear shoes if they didn't want to. They didn't go to bed if they didn't want to. Peggy Bach sent your children there.
Before or after?
After. I'm not sure if they all went there, but she could give you a great deal more. And it was a very remarkable school. But then the war came along and it had problems during the war, and I know that it doesn't exist anymore.
So Mr.
Anyway, Miquon did.
Miquon.
Dartington Hall.
Yeah, it carries on, right?
Yeah.
Mr. Curry advised, is that his
Yeah, well,
role?
yes, he was sort of the mentor of the thing.
He didn't mind the competition?
Oh, no, not at all, because he was over there. There was no competition.
I see.
He thought Peggy was brilliant, which she was, and that she would be able to reconstruct from his ideas what he thought we could do over here. And
You s-
I would say that he was very, very helpful.
You said Peggy was brilliant. What, was she an educator or she just
Well,
a
neither of us were
well-educated
educators.
woman?
We were just mothers
Mhm.
who were interested, and I think there was a sort of feeling of, well, we're doing something, and it was one way of having interesting days instead of whiling away the time, not doing something that was of any purpose. It was a purposeful thing to do,
Yeah.
and I think that we both liked that idea very much.
So a lot of the energy came from the fact that there were people free to spend the time.
Yes, that we were very lucky, and these people had enough money that they weren't dependent on the school salaries for at first, you know.
Right.
So this gave us, made a difference. But they were doing it because they loved doing it,
And they had some time.
and they had the time. In those days, we still had maids, nurses,
Right.
and things like that. We didn't have to.
But they also had the interest. I
But
mean,
they had
could
the
have very
interest.
easily
I
sent their
think it was
children
a
off
thing
to
that at this
school.
period in the 30s, it was just ready for this. This was sort of the in thing that was coming in at this point.
Now, did some of this have something to do with John Dewey?
Not at all, as
Because
I
that's
remember.
what we had heard, and that's interesting
Well,
that you say that.
It might have from Peggy's point of view.
Yeah.
Never remember thinking about John Dewey at this point at all.
Mhm. It's interesting.
It was just as that we went to the schools that existed.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And there weren't very many.
Yeah.
But we couldn't go to all of them, but we did a great deal of investigating in a rather, I would say, superficial way, because I didn't know what we were looking for, really.
But you knew that you liked,
But I knew that there was something to this, that
Yeah.
education will always be an anathema, I think, of how we do it.
Well,
So that's
thank
it. Well,
you.
Well, thank
I-
you,
Thank
Peggy.
you.
Yeah.
Do you have anything?
Oh, we're gonna get a chance to talk about
Yeah.
this.
Off,
Okay.
off camera.
Okay.
Thank you, Carol, thank you.
Thank
Well,
you.
I hope I can